Welcome to ADHDKC Conversations, the podcast from Kansas City's CHAD chapter, ADHDKC, where we bring you practical information, expert insights, and real-life strategies to help individuals and families affected by ADHD and other neurodevelopmental differences thrive. Our podcast follows a unique format. Each month, we introduce an upcoming ADHDKC parent group speaker so you can get to know them before their presentation. Then, with their permission, we share the full recording of their talk in a future podcast episode. Think of today's conversation as a preview, a chance to meet our guest, hear some valuable insights, and decide whether you'd like to join us for the live event and a deeper discussion that follows. I'm one of your co-hosts, Kristen Steppe.
And I'm Caroline Danda.
Today, we're excited to welcome Sarah Kesty. Sarah is an executive function, ADHD and autism coach, educator, author, speaker, and the founder of Brain Tools School. She's also the host of Executive Function podcast. She has nearly 2 decades of experience helping students, families, and educators build real-life executive function skills. She's a 4-time Teacher of the Year and is known for translating research into practical, brain-friendly strategies that actually work in everyday life. I had the opportunity to be a guest on Sarah's podcast earlier this year, and after getting to know her and hearing her approach, I knew ADHDKC parents would benefit from learning from her. That's why we're thrilled that she'll be speaking at our ADHD parent group event, our ADHDKC parent group event this August. So Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, before we dive into executive function, we'd really like to get to know you a little bit and what's your story. How did you become interested in working with neurodivergent students and families? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I taught special ed for nearly 20 years, and I think what really kept revealing itself to me over and over again was the power of executive function. And it really started mostly from the autism research, because autism has usually a little bit better funding than ADHD. So that's where I was introduced to executive function and really just testing it out with students and watching them thrive. And the academics mattered, but they were just shadowed by the empowerment of executive function, which then, of course, being a little bit nerdy led me to looking at, okay, how do I learn more about this? What's happening in the brains, and just really trying to figure out how to infuse it into my classroom so that it wasn't overwhelming, but really empowering with students.
Yeah, well, you've had such a diverse background with teaching, coaching, speaking, and podcast hosting. What have you learned over the years about the challenges that many neurodivergent people face that neurotypical people often misunderstand?
Great question. I think it's kind of twofold. The first part is we can't ever assess effort. And a lot of the times, what from the outside looks like just stalling or not taking action. And it can almost be frustrating because people can say, this is the thing I need to do, and then they're not activating. I think we really need to be mindful of understanding that that's not a lack of effort. Crossing the bridge between knowing and doing is incredibly hard when you've got executive dysfunction. And I think that's one of the big misunderstandings. The second thing I think we need to remember is even when we've had like a really good brain day or our strategies are working, brains are impacted. I mean, it's an organ. They're impacted by so many factors that capacity ebbs and flows throughout a day, throughout the week. And so again, it's kind of aligned with not assuming effort. It's just kind of staying curious about what went right, what worked, and maybe how do I extract those factors and kind of template them into other spots in my life or my child's life, because we can see the ebbs and flows and then kind of take information from there. So I guess I'm melting that in with a strategy, but I would say those are kind of the two broader misunderstandings.
That's so important. And that's really where the executive functioning comes in. And that's this buzzword that I feel like everybody's talking about, executive functioning. But what does it really mean? And how does that play out, in particularly for families of kids, when kind of, as you were alluding to, like what we can't, see just right here, I had an idea and I couldn't get it out, right? That idea of like what's in my head or what I want to do isn't always, the knowledge is maybe isn't enough. But how can you explain executive functioning in a way that makes sense?
Yeah, it's interesting because some people, like when you first read about it, they're like, oh, it's like a conductor of a symphony or an airport traffic controller kind of, and that tells you the function. Like it gives you a sense of, holy cow, there's a lot going on at once, but it really doesn't say, what does it actually do? So I describe executive function very plainly. And then of course it's an onion. You're going to get lots of layers, but executive function is the mental tools we use to manage our life right now and get towards our goals. And then of course that can kind of parlay into, okay, there, I teach it as like a tree, and there's 3 branches of future skills, like planning, organizing, that kind of thing. In the moment skills, like time management, emotional regulation, and then learning management, which is kind of like, how do I best retain and recall information? And obviously there's a really easy application with that in school because students are asked to retain and recall information all the time, but it's also in real life. Like, how do I kind of absorb my home routine as a mom and be able to kind of internalize it so that I can get through the day? Or how do I learn new things at work? So we're constantly learning, and that's one of the branches I would say if you wanted to get a little more detailed in the executive function definition.
Yeah, doing this podcast, I actually think about my own executive dysfunction quite a bit because in day-to-day life, I talk to humans all the time. I am a pediatrician. I talk to families. I can explain things. When I'm doing this podcast, I actually have a hard time because I'm trying to listen to somebody else talk, and then I have to think about what I'm going to say next and do that planning while I'm still remembering what you're saying so I can keep track of it. There's a lot going on. So day to day, our kids are dealing with similar challenges in the classroom when they're trying to remember the information, what the teacher's saying, all these things. Specifically for neurodivergent kids, what do you think some of the skills that tend to be the biggest struggles for them in the classroom setting or even at home might be?
Yeah. And as you were describing it, I was thinking you're managing the incoming information of content, but you're also getting cues from your peers or like directions from your teacher of how to student. And if those go contrary to what your brain or your body needs, like I need novelty or I need movement, then you're also managing the suppression of those needs inside the classroom setting, which, we could argue maybe we don't want to set kids up to have to suppress so hard, but I think that's an entirely separate podcast. I think if I had to, you like that? I'm like, here's a little teaser. I think if I had to categorize kind of the things that people come to me for broadly would be managing overwhelm. And that also means kind of addressing the reason that we get to the overwhelm. And sometimes it's just the brand of task is just too much, too fast, too hot, like, ugh. And that's a different sense of overwhelm than the overwhelm maybe mid-semester where we've got some missing work and we need to take some retakes and we can kind of tease out and work on some strategies to maybe not have that academic dip be so deep. But so I think managing overwhelm is one of the big things that people come to me for. And then having a way to lock in, because like I was saying before, and lock in is kind of the term that kids use right now for deep focus. Like, how can I activate? How can I get started? And like I was saying before, that bridge between being able to identify, here's what I want to do, and actually taking action on the thing that you've identified is incredibly elusive. And sometimes that bridge is made of dental floss, and sometimes it is like made of iron. You know what I mean? And it varies a ton. So we really work on ways to kind of befriend your brain and know what works for your particular neurology and kind of the factors that you can play with that help you lock in. Like, I know for me, it's gum. Like when I was writing my book, if I really needed to get going and I was struggling so much, gum was one of the things that was kind of like a last ditch effort. And I'd say 80% of the time my brain was like, oh, okay, I can do this for at least 20 minutes. And that seems really simple and kind of weird, but simple and weird is name of the game when we're filling our toolbox.
Yeah, you mentioned those academic dips. Parents so often get very frustrated because they feel like their kid is not doing as well as they should, or they might feel like their child isn't as smart or capable. Can you kind of talk about why some bright, really capable kids might struggle with their everyday tasks, and that can affect grades, but it also can affect how they're living at home and how often they get in trouble for not doing the things they're supposed to be doing.
Right, right. And I do want to, again, kind of acknowledge part of the system that perpetuates that before we go into kind of the individual reasons. And I was so guilty of this when I was teaching. I liked the people part. I didn't like the admin part. And so grading, it might take me 3 weeks or a month. And so what we see, and again, I was part of this, so I'm not throwing shade on teachers, but what we see is this sort of cyclical silence in the grading and then a big grade dump where it's like all of a sudden we've got progress reports and now everything's in the grade book. And so to parents that can look like a big like wildfire when it's really been like small little things, but we didn't have the feedback loop to know that it was happening. And for a brain that's kind of now or not now, like a brain with ADHD, you need those small little sparklers of awareness before it turns into that big inferno. So that is kind of part of the systemic thing that maybe we can even address by giving teachers a heads up, or maybe sending a little love note at the beginning of the year saying, hey, I know grading is a pain. I get it. I don't need the grades, but can you ping me or ping my kid, better yet, if they're missing something, or just like put a little X in the grade system so that we know you haven't graded it yet, but there's also nothing to grade, that kind of thing, so that we can kind of address it as we go. But Kristen, back to your question about why are our brilliant kids struggling with things that seem kind of simple from the outside? Again, it's that we kind of make this assumption that if you've traveled around the sun a certain number of times, you should have these skill sets, right? Like you should know how to get started. You should know how to study. And oftentimes we spend a lot of time telling kids that like why they're lacking, but we haven't really taught them how. So sometimes it's I'm not even going to say sometimes. I'm going to be bold and say always, because this is the safest assumption. If they can't do it, I didn't make this up. It's a lack of skill, not will. We just need to figure out like, where's the system falling apart? What are we missing? What skill? Is it body doubling? Is it where you're trying to work? Is it when you're trying to work? Is it overwhelmed that the task seems really big and we need smaller bits?
I have so many thoughts about what you just said. Ooh, I was checking out your website and it brought me to when I was the resource section. I think for one of the students section was reflect and reframe. And I think you were talking about if you have a should or a would about a child, you have to back up and think about, no, it's not about they should be able to do this. What's getting in the way? That's kind of what I took from that. And that's what I took from what you just said is like, what is it that's missing? That so that you can help them build the bridge, even if it is a dental floss.
Right.
So I had that thought, which is a great way of just thinking about it differently. But then that led my brain down the rabbit hole of, okay, I have these kids. I know that they have some executive dysfunction. They're going to need some support to build all those skills. But now I'm just a nag. And so how do you help build independence in your kids without showing up as somebody who feels like you're nagging them all the time, or then the kids perceive like all you do is get on my case and you're always telling me what to do. So I feel like there's some tension there. And I thought maybe you could help us with some brain-friendly strategies or some ideas about how do we navigate that to help our kids be independent and learn the skills.
Yeah, I would say that's kind of the secondary part of my job is to help parents go from manager to consultant, and it just eases up so much friction. So you're absolutely right. And going back to your first point of the should component, I think the cool thing about having that language of like, oh, you should or you should have is that if you transfer it from something you say to something you think, then you've got a good way to illuminate the skill gaps, right? Because whatever goes in that fill in the blank of, honey, you're a 7th grader, you should, whatever finishes that sentence is kind of the pillar and maybe the outside layer of the onion of what our kids need to develop. So there's still some utility in having that, but let's be honest, it's not helpful to remind the kid like, hey, you're lacking this. Like you should
Right.
be able to. Like they are very, very aware. And that might not be something that they reveal to you because it's delicate and vulnerable. But, through coaching, I hear it all the time where there's like a lot of guilt and shame. And so it's not a matter of not knowing. But getting back to the second part, so how do we do this without being the nag? And it's tricky, and I'll acknowledge kind of the bind that we're in, because let's say you're learning, like I was learning pickleball for a while. Big deal if I wasn't good at it, which spoiler, I wasn't. I'm just not competitive. Like I would stare at other people's faces to make sure that they were feeling okay about the game versus actually watching the ball. My husband would be like, you're done here. So, but when I was learning it, it was low stakes, no big. Money didn't depend on it. Future opportunities didn't depend on it. It was just fun. School's not like that. We can say like, oh, take this strategy and test it out. But if it doesn't work, it's high stakes. You fail a class, you get on academic probation in college. And so it's this weird kind of space we're in where we're encouraging growth, but acknowledging the penalties. So as parents, it is okay to own some of the things that like deep down you're like, they should be doing this. Like maybe you're in charge of meals. Maybe you're packing the water bottle. And you know what? Like, yeah, they're 16. Would it be ideal if they could do it on their own? For sure. But we're going to give them space to have maybe a different focus on skill development right now and take care of some of the basics, knowing that, hey, we might even park it in the schedule for like, hey, we're going to work on this in the summer when the stakes are lower. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be on anyone else's timeline. And then I think that the nag replacement is kind of two parts. The first one is making things visual. So a lot of the times our kids are so sweet and so good at yes, ma'aming us. Like, okay, got it. Yes. But they might not even be aware that they didn't actually capture what we were saying. And that's a compliance reaction, right? We've kind of trained that in school. Like you say yes, you acknowledge your teacher. We never really checked, like, did that actually land? So instead of getting frustrated, like, oh, you didn't listen or you forgot, let's park it somewhere visual. Let's put it in a calendar or on a list or on the wall somewhere so that we have that visual to reference. Does that make sense? And then the other piece would be like, ask your expert. Your kid is the expert. So like, hey, what does this feel like? Or what's your plan for? Or what do you notice? What do you observe? Just keep using, like, if you feel like you have to interact verbally, see if you can change some of it into questions. So you're having them examine their thinking and take on the executive function kind of heavy lifting.
Super helpful and thinking about how to approach it. But it's hard as a parent. I just want to acknowledge that. It's really hard as a parent. My youngest graduated about a year ago, and all three of my kids are neurodiverse and have ADHD. And I can't tell you the relief that I felt when they graduated high school, just from like, I didn't feel like I was having to check in all the time or kind of monitor or kind of figure out what do they need, when do they need it, how much do I step in, how much do I step out. So I appreciate that framework, but just also acknowledging that that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to be, feel the weight of helping your kid get through school.
Yeah. And there is space to acknowledge that it's semi-high stakes, right? Like
Yeah.
low grades could close some future doors, and that stinks. And I will kind of also provide a little bit of like hope and light there, that I've seen a ton of the kids I work with get into schools that they were dreaming about, that maybe didn't have beautiful grades freshman, sophomore year, that were able to explain, hey, listen, there's some ugly parts on my transcript, and you actually want me as a student because look at the difference junior, senior year. I built those skills. Like, I'm not going to be a college freshman that flounders because I've already done the floundering. I've already done the self-discovery. Like, I know myself as a student. I know what works for my brain. And oftentimes that self-awareness and being able to speak to your student skill set can open doors that otherwise maybe your grades would have shut.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Just thinking about the journey and always kind of thinking about they don't have to learn it all at once in the journey, and that, any one thing may not necessarily be catastrophic to their future lives. There's nothing that'll create some anxiety in a parent than having that kind of thought show up in their head, is thinking about that future, thinking about things and what needs to happen. So I'm going to remind myself again, it's always on their timeline, not on my timeline.
Totally.
Great. Okay. So with all of this great insight and information, I love just the fact that you say to get curious, ask questions. And I find in life in general, if we just ask questions because we don't know what to say or what to do, we can help the person who is having whatever problem figure out on their own how to solve the problem, which is what we all want for our kids anyway, to grow that independence. So I think that's a fantastic tip. But so often as a parent, we want to fix the problem. We can see the solution. We know what that kid needs to do, and we want to just tell them. And knowing that that's not necessarily the best thing for the situation, because then a teenager most likely isn't going to take that advice and run with it. They're going to be like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Right. So if you could wave a magic wand and have parents stop doing one thing that unintentionally makes these challenges worse for their teens, what would it be?
This is a tough pill to swallow, but when we launch into lectures when our kids are dysregulated, it extends the dysregulation and none of it's going to get absorbed anyway. We don't process language very well when we're dysregulated. So an example would be let's say your kid's having a kind of big reaction to the grade dump where all of a sudden we have all this missing work and they're super overwhelmed. Getting them back into a regulated state, whatever helps them feel okay, this might be possible, is priority number one. But what do we want to do? We want to say, how could you let this happen? Oh my gosh, you're going to fail. And kind of, we accidentally, by showing that we're invested and we care, we accidentally force them up the escalation cycle and make it last longer. And so I would say it is so hard. It is superhuman sometimes, but as much as possible, trust future you that you get to talk about it. It's not like you're I'm not going to deal with this. It's more I'm going to deal with this when it's optimized timing so that we have a productive conversation so that my kid doesn't, get so overwhelmed that they're shut down and then there's nothing done that night. It's more hey, I know we're both stressed. I know we don't think clearly when we're stressed. What do you want to do to calm yourself down? How long do you need? Okay, we'll check back in at that time. I'm going to do XYZ for myself too. That can be night and day difference.
I love that approach of here's what the problem is right now. I have all these assignments and we need to think about moving forward. And so that's task also, I guess, number two. Number one is to re-regulate and kind of bring the emotion down a little bit. But it's really thinking about right now, I need to think about moving forward. Rehashing the past right now isn't going to serve anybody's purpose. But as you move forward, you can rethink the past and say, okay, we probably need something in the middle or some strategies, or you can rethink and use that to learn how to do something in the future. But now is not the time when you have 10 assignments due. So I appreciate that kind of 1, 2, 3 approach to kind of tackling that overwhelm.
Yeah. And that was just one example. I mean, it could be they had a fight with a friend or, they there's tons of reasons our kids would be up here. And it's just kind of being mindful of if you're seeing the signs that they're not themselves, that they're really dysregulated, that's not the time to talk about it.
And is there anything, okay, no lecturing. Let's limit the lecturing. So that's what not to do. But also let's talk about, okay, well, what's one thing they can do?
In the situation of overwhelm or?
Yeah, or just in general, to help and support the executive functioning. So it helps grow it or helps them move forward as opposed to lecturing, shutting things down. What's one thing that can kind of help it move forward?
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, when we talked about this a little bit before, make reminders visual, make time visual. So as much as possible, make calendars just part of how your family rolls. It goes on the calendar. And periodically check the calendar. Like maybe it's a Sunday night kind of overview of the week, but as much as possible, having clocks and timers and things like that to help time be concrete and visual can be a big helper. And then this one, again, grain of salt, and it's going to work when you're regulated as well and when the stakes aren't super high. So I recognize that this is not an always strategy, but sometimes kids need a chance to test out strategies that intuitively we think are silly, or we think like, come on, just use a dang planner. And they're like, no, I want to do my notes app and I want to do Remind and I want to do this. And so long as they're testing out and having the chance to reflect on how it went and what they learned about their brain, they can't lose. So even if I've had kids that it took 6 months to get them to stop the writing on their hand system of capturing their work. And I mean, I know we're laughing, but like some of them were like, so
No, it worked.
It worked until it didn't. But they needed the chance to own it and feel it out and kind of try it on for size without too much external pressure. Because if it turns into an act of compliance where they're like, my mom's making me or my teacher says I have to, it's not really a tool they're going to use. As soon as that external pressure is off, then they're left back in a void of like, okay, I don't actually know how to manage my work system because I've only been doing things that I was forced to do. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, because they have to arrive at solutions on their own to some degree through their own experience. So they have to figure out like and understand like this isn't working for me before they have any skin in the game to make a change. It's kind of what I hear. So sometimes they have to get it wrong to get it right.
Yeah. I feel like with that, so often they get it wrong and they get it wrong again and they get other things wrong. And they oftentimes start to just take on this label as failure or not good enough or whatever they put in their own mind because they never quite live up to their own expectations or their teacher's expectations or their parents' expectations. So what have you seen, Sarah, when kids with ADHD finally start to understand how their brain is working, to take the label off of them and put it into this is how my brain is working and what I can do with it? What do you see when these kids start to recognize some of it?
Good question. And I want to address that kind of like, oh, they take on the like, well, this didn't work and that didn't work. There are always pieces that do work. And every time something doesn't work, we can neutralize it pretty quick, saying like, okay, you weren't psychic. You weren't able to guess like your future formula. But what did go right? What did you learn about like what maybe didn't feel right about the strategy that maybe we can go in the opposite direction next time? So there's if we can be part of that reflection and not let it kind of spiral in that rumination of, the negativity bias, we can help kind of tease out at least some components of what we learned or what went right so that it's not an entire like just a failure. Because even, I mean, I have boatloads of strategies, and even sometimes mine, with the best of intention, fall on their face, or we didn't anticipate something that would really impact capacity that day or whatever it is. So there's always that space for saying like, we're humans, there's a ton of variables, and we can forgive ourselves for not being psychic. That said, kind of the bright side, when we're able to neutralize the statements about our brains. So I have a brain that needs to see time concretely, or I have a brain that needs to wind down for sleep 4 hours before bedtime, or whatever it is, we kind of start to describe things in a way that aren't positive or negative, aren't comparisons. And that can be a huge game changer because then students are able to kind of forgive themselves. I know that sounds silly, but they've carried around a lot about how they should be, and just kind of neutralizing and owning, this is my brain, this is how it reacts, can really take some of the teeth away from that like self-critic.
Yeah. I don't think it sounds silly at all to have to forgive yourself we are our own worst bullies. We really bully ourselves all the time, and we need to learn how to be our own best friends. And so for people who want to get to know you on a more one-on-one basis, I will definitely put your contact information in the show notes because you have boatloads of information and tools. So I think that's awesome.
Very official boatloads. Yep.
But that's great. Now you're going to be speaking for ADHDKC's parent group on Tuesday, August 11th for a presentation called Executive Function Strategies for Teens. Can you give listeners just a little preview or glimpse at what they're going to learn?
It will be a lot of silliness, my friends. It'll be a lot of good stuff. So we're going to talk about how to support your kid with school and lifing stuff, how to not make it be a huge burden for you, how to kind of the same way I did in my classroom where it was like infusions, not extra. We're going to help families develop that and answer some of your questions. You know, it's a tricky journey that we're on and we're stronger together. So I'm really excited to engage with everybody and learn from you and with you and, build some new ideas together.
Fantastic. I can't wait. I'm always excited to learn more. We have one more thing before we go, if you're up for it, is our rapid fire question. So just a simple question with hopefully a simple answer. Are there ever any really simple answers? Probably not, but we'll try it. If you're your favorite executive function tool or app.
I am going to have a lame answer that any calendar that helps you concretize time and gives you reminders is the best. So I don't have one favorite, but just that in particular, having a system in that manner is going to help a bunch.
Can I give you one of mine that I just discovered?
Sure.
Sarah Ward in the 360 Thinking has something called Ace Your Time. And it's a plugin that you can put into your Google Calendar. And when you schedule an event, there's a little place that says Ace Your Time, and you can calculate and put in an event for the commute, for if it takes longer, for packing up. And so it couches that event with the time you need between going and coming so that you can plan for it better. And if you move the event, it'll move with it. So I'm just going to put a plug-in for that. It's called Ace Your Time. And it's a plug-in that you can put into your Google or Apple or other calendar. So what's one book for every parent on what is one book every parent of a neurodivergent teen should read?
Ooh, Brainstorm by Dan Siegel is a good one. Not necessarily for neurodivergent teens, but and it's written for parents and kids to read together. That's a good one. Melissa Moore's Good Sleep Guide for Neurodivergent Kids is great too. I'm breaking the rules, not answering just one, but Emily Kircher Morris is another. She's a friend of mine and an excellent author on Twice Exceptional Kids as well. So there's 3.
Fantastic.
Emily Kircher Morris was a past guest on our parent group talks.
Nice.
Yeah. How about one productivity tip that you personally rely on?
Ooh, getting enough sleep. That sounds so weird, but my brain is very reactive to sleep. So making sure that I have planned for actual rest and being realistic about how long things take, that can help a bunch. Also planning for deep work ahead of time. So making sure I don't bring my phone in, or I've kind of managed all the extraneous stuff, given a heads up to the people I love that I won't be available. Those can really help because it clears the deck in terms of distractions, but it also kind of sets me up with social accountability because now I've told people I'm not available because I'm going to work, so I better work.
Those are great tips. And what's maybe one thing people might be surprised to learn about you?
Ooh, you can identify about 30-ish birds by sound. I'm very into birds. I'm proud of that.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I was just listening. I was outside this morning because the weather was really nice, drinking my coffee and listening to the birds, wishing I wish I knew what bird was making that sound.
Yeah. And you have different birds than you do.
I know. I need to phone a friend.
There you go.
Well,
we
now
can do them
now
right
you know the
now.
friend to talk on. Well, as is typical ADHD fashion, the rapid fire questions kind of weren't really rapid fire because we had to get into a discussion. But Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights.
Yeah, sorry I broke the rules on rapid fire, but you're welcome. It was really a pleasure to be here.
It's all good, and we can't wait to hear more from you. And I know that all the people joining us at the Parent Support Group will want to learn even more and walk away with some great valuable ideas that they can use.
Yes, and for those of you who want to join, it is on Tuesday, August 11th, 2026. It's online, so you can join from anywhere. Sarah Kesty will guide parents through brain-friendly ways to help support teens in building the executive function skills they need to thrive at home, school, and beyond. You'll walk away with practical strategies you can begin using right away. And you can find the registration information for that and all our other events at ADHDKC.org under the Events tab.
Thank everyone for listening to ADHD Conversations. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, share it with somebody else who might benefit, and we will see you next time. All right.
Thank you so much.